Hey everyone, I'll be here with Keyrenter Houston. I wanted to make this video about evictions because evictions are frankly one of the most common questions we get at property management as a property manager in Houston. And understanding the eviction process is probably one of the most important pieces of being a landlord in Texas. In fact, I think it's a very easy argument to say it's probably the most important piece to understand. I mean, just as an example, we had a client come to us, a prospective client come to us once, I'm pretty much on the verge of tears saying, hey, they had a tenant that had been in their property for over 6 months, had not paid a dime. They had an attorney was clearly overwhelmed, unable to follow the exact process or whatnot. And they were simply stuck in the eviction process. And then they came out to us. By and large, with some notable exceptions, like during COVID and whatnot, when some of the courts were shut down, an eviction in Texas today, for instance, should take no longer than like a month and a half, the whole process, right? And so it can be really stressful, and frankly is pretty much always going to be stressful, especially if you do not know what to expect or what the process is. So today I'll try and walk you through the eviction process in Texas and help you learn or know what to expect. If you like content like this, or you feel like this is helpful, it'd be helpful for me if you like and subscribe. I'm always trying to, we started posting a bunch of property management tips, landlord tips. We've got a good video on rental applications to hopefully never get you to this process, because you'll find tenants that will pay their rent. The first thing I want to say is, as much as possible, everything that can be in writing should be in writing, right? Just make sure you write it down, make sure you send out emails, make sure that the tenant understands everything that you're sharing with them. So that way they understand the ramifications of action or inaction, and you're able to ensure you go to the court or the court day with all of your ducks in a row. So the first important point is when and why a landlord can legally evict a tenant. This is not always understood, so I just want to briefly go over them. The first point is, of course, the most common one. This one is probably understood: late rent. A tenant doesn't pay their rent. We actually have a pretty good video on rent payments and how to collect or pursue late rent. Give that a watch if you're struggling with that right now. The next option or reason to evict is tenant overstaying an expired lease. This is really important because it's not just an expired lease. By Texas law, every expired lease automatically goes into a month-to-month lease. It's not just an expired lease. You also have to make sure proper notice has been given. The third reason to evict is a lease violation that puts the tenant in default. Default meaning the legal term in your lease that dictates what a tenant shouldn't do, that could basically have them renege on the contract. There are reasons why a landlord may default, though eviction is usually not a remedy for that, right? Obviously. Once we've determined that the tenant falls within one of those three categories, then you have to follow the required notice periods and legal steps to then get to the eviction process. It's not like you can just go to the court and be like, hey, my tenant's late, let's evict them. You have to first send out a notice. And so a notice to vacate is the official term. There are different types of notices to vacate. Notice to pay and vacate is the most common one, especially for tenants that are not paying. A notice to cure for a lease violation is a term used if a tenant is committing a lease violation, like busting up the property in some fashion that puts that tenant in default of the lease. And so there are different types. Lease holdover, vacate due to lease holdover is another term used for a notice to vacate for tenants that are overstaying a lease. There's no standard form in Texas, though if you Google search, I'm sure you'll find plenty of examples. The most important pieces of a notice to vacate are that, one, it explains who has the tenant's name, has a landlord's name. Two, it says who's delivering the notice. Three, it has timelines for when the vacate has to, or I guess the tenant has to vacate or fix whatever the issue is. And then 4, it also has to have, if it's a fee of some sort or there are fees or late rent that's owed, then it has to have those amounts on there. And then pretty importantly, it also has to have a section that says how this notice was delivered. And so just as an example, we, for instance, at Keyrenter Houston, actually physically will go to the property and post on the door. And then we also will mail the notice via certified mail as well, right? We do both. And the reason we do both is because we just want to make sure as much as possible that the tenant has received the notice to vacate, because that is one of the base requirements for an eviction to be even filed. If the tenant has not received the notice to vacate, an eviction will just be sent back down and you got to start with the process all over again. So if you provide a notice to pay or vacate, or if you are issuing one, you have to ensure that they receive it. The second really important point, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that you have to ensure that the tenant has a reasonable amount of time to rectify the situation too. For rent, for instance, that's at least 3 days, though it can be much longer. Remember, for a lease cancellation, I talked about this before, you have to give proper notice. And in that case, the best way to do this is usually just in writing. Even email is okay, but to give a tenant 2 months of notice. We'll even deliver it to the tenant like in person sometimes if we have to, right? Whatever we can do to protect our clients' properties. Before I move forward, just a shameless plug, Keyrenter Houston's been around for 10 years. I've been a part of Keyrenter Houston for 10 years. Started the company a while ago when I knew nothing about property management and landlording. And now I think I'm pretty good at it. Our company manages around 250 doors all across Houston. And if you find yourself in this situation or considering even the prospect of eviction and it's giving you cold sweats, give us a shout. Let us chat. I mean, worst case scenario, we just give you some advice. Okay, back to the video. One of the best ways to avoid eviction in the first place is to hire a property management company. And obviously, at Keyrenter Houston, we are a property management company. But the reason I say all of this is because a property management company, by and large, will help you go through tenant screening, enforce lease terms, and collect rent on your behalf. So you don't have to deal with all of that. That said, some people do it themselves, and that's totally fine. I'm just sharing that it can be very helpful to ensure that you are following all the terms, right, without having things slip through. The number one reason why we get a property that is in lease holdover or in some issue is because the landlord, who was self-managing, at least in these instances, just didn't follow the lease terms properly. And then we end up having to go through the whole process all over again. That's one really important point that I just wanted to share. The next one is you have to properly serve these eviction notices. I talked about it earlier where Keyrenter Houston, we will actually just go to the property and we will post the notice on the door, send it via certified mail, or hand it to the person. And honestly, we'll usually do one of two. But I'm harping on this because truly the easiest way and the most common way, at least that I've seen in court, for JP being justice of the peace, to throw out an eviction and have you restart is because the notice to vacate was not properly delivered. And so you need to ensure that it was delivered properly. And Texas Property Code goes through it, but again, easy solution, just go there, post it on the door, post it on the inside of the door if you feel safe, and send it via certified mail. Those are the two simplest things, and make sure you have the receipt and a photo of you posting it. Then the next step is this is where you actually file. And so in Harris County, you can go to the county clerk. You can also file online by creating like an e-file, Texas e-file account. There are also some paid options too. And the benefit of filing at the actual office is that you can go to the clerk and ask them for some advice on how to file it. Sometimes they'll be unhelpful and be like, we can't give you legal advice, but more often than not, you'll find a clerk that will guide you appropriately, tell you the rules. And most importantly, you won't have to get a notary. The clerk can sign it for you. In Harris County, this is something super important and specific to Harris County and a lot of counties across Texas, but at least, Harris County for the purposes of this video, don't include the late fees in the amount requested. It'll just be thrown out by the judge. In fact, when you go up to the judge will say, hey, how much rent and only rent is owed. You can pursue for late fees, but that's really in civil court later on. Okay, use the constable service. When they ask you, they'll be like, hey, how do you want to serve? Use the constable service. It costs more, but it ensures that there are no questions that the tenant received the eviction. If you don't use a constable service, then there could be potential questions that the tenant's like, if the tenant says, hey, I never was served these eviction papers. If the constable serves it, the constable is basically stamping your service saying, hey, I served the eviction court case or eviction suit to the tenant. Let's say the court case happens. If everything's all good, you had a legal reason, an actual valid reason to evict, then you'll get something either called a summary judgment or a default judgment based off if the tenant comes in. Either which way, the tenant basically has a certain amount of time to resolve the problem based off of what the judge gives them. And then you get the opportunity, if they don't leave, if they still refuse to leave, you get the opportunity to file a writ of possession. Now you have to go back to the court case after when the judge will tell you basically, hey, this is when you can come back, but usually it's 7 days. And at that point, you go back to the courthouse, you have to file for a writ of possession. You pay for that. Again, you have to pay for constable service because the constable will go by and post on their front door saying, hey, I'm going to come here on this day and ensure you leave. This is when the actual police come by and ensure that the property is vacant for you to then move all their stuff out and retake possession. If they appeal, if the tenants appeal, they have to pay or file the right bond for the appeal to move to appeals court. So if a tenant appeals, which oftentimes they do, you have to ensure that they paid for the right fees. Because if they don't, then the appeals just falls through and you can go through the writ process. Remember, this is something that's very important. If you have a property management company, in the appeals process, you generally have to self-represent or hire an attorney to help you through this process. I mean, property management companies usually have attorneys that they work with for appeals eviction court cases. During the writ process, the constable's office will call you to schedule the writ execution day and time. And it's really dependent on how busy they are. This can take up to several weeks. In fact, there was a eviction that we processed. We got summary judgment, default judgment actually. The tenant wasn't moving out. We filed for the writ and it took a month, I think, to get the actual writ executed. There's very little you can do, unfortunately, to expedite this unless there's clear and imminent danger from the tenant. Even if they're busting up the property, unfortunately, there's not too much you can do. You can call the constable's office, and that's something that we do for all of our evictions constantly, so that way we can stay top of mind, and also we have a positive relationship with the constable, so hopefully they can expedite some of our processing. But generally it's first come, first serve. At the writ, you must be ready or have people ready to move out all of the tenant's possessions from the property to the lawn. Either you or you have to hire movers to assist. That's it. And it has to be done at that moment. If you're not ready, constable's just going to move on and you got to refile. So before I move on, and again, I feel like I always forget this. I should have done this in the beginning. Just as a disclaimer, eviction laws vary pretty wildly in some cases by state and city and county, and especially in Texas. Always consult a legal expert before taking any action. I recommend getting an attorney and hiring a property management company that can help you out. The video that I'm sharing and the content that I'm sharing is really for informational purposes only. It's not legal advice. It's my opinion based off my experience. And in all cases, really, evictions should always be a last resort. A solid lease agreement and thorough tenant screening will help avoid most of these situations well before they start. At Keyrenter Houston, our eviction rate is less than 2%. And that really happened after we doubled down and focused on our tenant screening and the way we vet our tenants. We have a good video on that if you want to take a look. If you found this video helpful, again, please like and subscribe. It'll be really helpful to me. Thanks.